right, guess what? We've got another sermon request. You reached out. You said you would like to talk about God's order. You look around and you see God's intended order in all different aspects of life, and you thought it may be good for us to be reminded of this. Do you ever kind of feel like things get a little crazy and a little chaotic and a little out of order? Yeah, I'm seeing some heads nod. You think about God's creation. I mean, we're going all the way back to Genesis 1. Now, by the way, good to see you. Got visitors with us, Brother Miller. Good to see you. First time here. All of you, good to be with you. You look at Genesis 1, God's order. He knows what he's doing. He can take kind of a chaotic situation and he forms it. Which, by the way, would have been very noticeable to Eastern religions and their concept of gods and what they do. This Jehovah God gives order to everything. He creates light. He separates the waters. You got the heavens. Land begins to appear. You remember that? The waters collect. You got lakes and seas. And then as the narrative continues, he fills those spaces. So we can go back to this concept of light and space, and he puts other lights out there, the stars, the planets. The great light to rule the day, the light to rule the night. And then whenever he had separated those waters up in that sky, we look up and what's flying around? Birds. He fills that space with birds. And all that water that collected, now you've got fish and so on and so forth. And then that land that had appeared, that had all that vegetation, he begins to fill that now. And you've got livestock and creeping things. And then comes the crown of his creation, mankind, right? And he creates Adam and he creates Eve. And he has order and he has roles for them. And his creation is just wonderful. We're in awe of it. You can look out to the expanse of the skies, and we're still learning more and more, and we don't know what to do with it, but we do see how brilliant it is and how steady and orderly it is. Constellations, the sun, the moon, the stars, we literally, brethren, can tell time and seasons because of that. Are you worried about those moving? Are you worried about waking up and you don't know what day it is or what's going on or what time it is? Because of God's order. We look at the sky, we see the formation of birds and how they fly and their patterns, and we're scratching our heads. We look to the seas and we see the same thing, these patterns and these routes that these fish will take and how they'll find themselves back to a certain place at the right time of year. You get to land animals and livestock. I mean, you just watch the Discovery Channel and just learning about penguins alone will do it. You have literally people that they weren't sure what to do with all of this, and their field of study and their science, they begin to learn about these animals and they start coming to the conclusion of, I don't think this can be a coincidence. There's too much going on. This is too powerful. Look at how precise this is. And then you come to mankind. And it's not like whenever he came to the crown of his creation, he says, now them, I'm just going to kind of leave them alone and we'll just see what happens. No, he gives order. Even with Adam and Eve, they had roles, did they not? And they had areas of interest. And so it is. I want to remind you of a few places of order, okay? Like the governing authorities. We typically read the Romans 13 passage, so I'm just going to read 1 Peter. 1 Peter 2. You may be absolutely familiar with this text, so for you this is just hearing it again. But perhaps you're not familiar with this text. Just hear it. Just listen for a moment. I'm in 1 Peter chapter 2, verse 13. Be subject for the Lord's sake to every human institution, whether it be to the emperor as supreme or to governors as sent by him to punish those who do evil and to praise those who do good. For this is the will of God, that by doing good you should put to silence the ignorance of foolish people. Live as people who are free, not using your freedom as a cover-up for evil, but living as servants of God. Honor everyone, love the brotherhood, fear God, honor the emperor. We talked about this. We studied about this in classes before. We learned, too, from the Romans 13 passage that in particular, in case you miss it, it's not a coincidence. It's not like they just pop up and God goes, oh, this is interesting. Let me comment on these. These are actually in place by God. He has his hand in it. So what do we take away from this? Well, we understand that anytime you have mankind involved, it can have issues. Do our governing authorities have issues, brethren? Yes. But what we've also discussed, and we've agreed as a whole, is that whenever you look at these institutions and the governing authorities as a whole, they are actually doing as a whole good, some good things. Without governing authorities, you have chaos. Look at the church. For this passage, I'll go to Ephesians chapter 4. Again, not by any means the only passage. It's just one to illustrate the point. I'm in Ephesians chapter 4, verse 11. And he gave the apostles, the prophets, the evangelists, the shepherds, and teachers to equip the saints for the work of ministry, for building up the body of Christ, until we all attain to the unity of the faith and of the knowledge of the Son of God, to mature manhood, to the measure of the stature of the fullness of Christ, so that we may no longer be children, tossed to and fro by the waves and carried about by every wind of doctrine, by human cunning, by craftiness, and deceitful schemes. God says, you know what? I'm going to build my church, and the gates of Hades shall not prevail against it. But I'll just let them wing it, and we'll see what happens. No, you shouldn't be shocked. And God says, we're going to have some order to this. Jesus Christ was the chief cornerstone of that church. It was built off the foundation of the apostles and prophets. Do you remember that? By the way, just to be reminded, your New Testament authors are made up of apostles and prophets. And then here we are. We don't have apostles and prophets anymore. We have evangelists still. And more specifically, I draw attention to the shepherds. Now that term, it says teachers and shepherds. We don't know if that's two different aspects of one role, teacher shepherds or teachers and shepherds. I wouldn't lose any sleep over it. But the point is that we have shepherds, right, who also teach. These are people that are helping us out. We have teachers, we have evangelists, and we're here to build each other up. We're here to help each other mature, and we are here to help each other fight off false doctrine. Is that not true, what the passage says? Okay. Now, can that be flawed? Yes, because it's made up of people, but is the order, and is it good? You know it's good. And then we go to the family unit. We were spending time in Ephesians 5, so I'm going to go to Colossians chapter 3 with you. Last week we talked about husbands. We looked at Ephesians 5. Let's look at Colossians 3. I'll begin in verse 18. Wives, submit to your husbands as is fitting in the Lord. Husbands, love your wives and do not be harsh with them. Children, obey your parents in everything, for this pleases the Lord. Fathers, do not provoke your children, lest they become discouraged. Bondservants, obey in everything those who are your earthly masters, not by way of eye service as people pleasers, but with sincerity of heart, fearing the Lord. Whatever you do, work heartily, as for the Lord and not for men, knowing that from the Lord you will receive the inheritance as your reward. You are serving the Lord Christ. For the wrongdoer will be paid back for the wrong he has done, and there's no partiality. Masters, treat your bondservants justly and fairly, knowing that you also have a master in heaven. I'm going to say this again. These families, these moms and dads, these masters and slaves are made up of people. Can we have some issues? You know we can have some issues. But let me ask you, is this a good order? Is this a good plan for people? Joel made the argument during his class on the family that whenever the family is broken, it has a ripple effect, and that's a downfall of a nation. I agree with him on that one. I agree with him on that one, wholeheartedly. We have roles. We have can I use this word, a hierarchy in the family? Is it okay to say that? Jesus wasn't offended by this. In 1 Corinthians 11, in the first portion, we find out that the head of man is who, brothers? The head of woman is who? And the head of Christ is who? Okay, so Jesus wasn't offended by this. In his family, if you will, there was a hierarchy. It was meant for good. You know, and I know today we cringe at this idea when we read Masters and Bondservants. Let me tell you, our history of slavery, that was never what masters and slaves relationship was supposed to be. Masters were supposed to be just and fair. That was bad. And my point bringing that up, you want to read that? No, it was actually, it had its place in the way it was supposed to be. Okay. But here you are, and I'm thinking about this. I mean, you're all familiar with this. Yet, all this order is messed up. So many times it's messed up. You know, I don't want to give Satan too much credit, but I don't want to leave him out of the picture either. Don't you know that Satan understands the importance of order? And have you not seen how Satan has been pretty committed to messing up order? He likes to call things that are good evil and evil good. He likes to confuse you about what you should be doing. He enjoyed messing with Eve and her little time in the garden, and so on and so forth. And I got to tell you, just as a Bible student, there's just a hint in the scriptures here, there, that there's some backstory going on. And I'm not claiming to understand all of that is, but there's something going on in that heavenly realm. I can tell you this, Satan's puffed up. I can tell you this, he's a liar. And I can also tell you this, when it talks about Satan and his angels, I can tell you that the angels don't like their place of authority. They went outside their position. So if you were Satan, and you know how important this is, what would you do? Well, I would assume one thing you would do is you would begin to belittle these roles, and you would also confuse the roles. Would you agree with that? Like Eve. Oh, no. God's just holding you back. Well, you're creating rift between Eve and her maker. And also, should she have been doing that? Where was Adam? Right? Confusing the roles, taking lead, and creating a rift between something God had created. He's been doing this from the beginning. And what would that look like? Well, in the governing authorities, I would expect you encourage people not to respect them, first of all. You know, there's quite an emphasis in Romans 13 and in Peter to honor and respect this. And so that's one of the things I would do is I would begin to attack that. And also what ends up happening is that people begin to take matters in their own hands. Do you see that in our country? Let me tell you, politically, it doesn't matter what side of the fence you're on, where you're at. Do you see people wanting to take matters into their own hands? Is it a coincidence that we harp on this and the Bible specifically is wanting people not to do that? Do you think that's a coincidence? They become secular moral compasses. And the governing, now so here's the funny thing, as I was going through this, there are two truths that can seem contradictory, yet they can coexist. On one hand, we don't trust the governing authorities. We don't like the governing authorities. We're going to take down the governing authorities, or I'm going to riot, or whatever it is. On the other hand, well, the governing authorities are going to define life for me. So if they say that that's not life, then that'll be my moral compass. Isn't that funny? Well, which one is it? Oh, we're just so confused, we don't know what to do with it. Then you got other people that are saying, I don't like government. I want a smaller government. Yet the way they talk about their government and their country in another aspect, you think it's their God. Well, which one is it? So here's my encouragement. We need to reinforce what their role is to one another respectfully. Christians can't get caught up in this. We're not going to go too far or fall too short. God is behind governing authorities, and they play a good role, but they are not our God, and they are not our moral compass. And because we can define what it is and understand their place, they can always count on us to honor them and respect them, though they may not always act in a very respectful manner. Would you agree on that? Yet the governing authorities will benefit from the actions and the attitude of Christians. How fitting is that? See, and then we just kind of move on from them because we have an accurate picture of the role that they play. What about the church? If I were to confuse this, here's what I would do. First of all, leaders don't understand their roles. I'm not trying to be too harsh. Listen, you can go back for decades on material and people criticizing that in the church, elders are nothing more but glorified deacons. Have I said something you've never heard before? And where do you think that comes from? How does that creep in? So they don't know their roles. And then, this is brilliant because the greatest area that we need in a body is their spiritual leadership. They don't know how to do it. Satan's like, this is brilliant. This is brilliant. So we'll get caught up on whose job is it to hang the TV? Who's putting the chairs out? Oh, this is great. This is wonderful. God's good leaders are then dismissed. So here's another thing. If you get used to having men, and not by any means saying this is happening everywhere, but it definitely can happen, and it has happened. But then if you have leaders who understand their role, we don't like them because now they're doing something we're not used to. You're not supposed to be getting in my family's business. Well, we are. I don't like you calling me out in weaknesses. Well, I got to. You keep encouraging me on the spiritual side. I'm feeling belittled. Listen, I'm here to help you. I'm here to build you up. And so sometimes we'll dismiss them. Or who should lead changes. Now, this is kind of tied to number one. If you don't know what a shepherd is supposed to do, then you put in the wrong kind of guys. You ever heard that in the church we suffered from putting in CEOs instead of Christians? I'm being a little, okay? Guys, that's been a complaint for decades. And that doesn't matter if you're conservative or liberal, whatever. That's been a complaint for decades going on. And here's another victim to that. Men don't know what to work toward. My young brothers in Christ, do you know specifically what you're working toward? You know, in some religious groups, they're so far off that the women are literally taking the roles. And that's not, I'm saying that, isn't that a problem? Where do you think that comes from? And it's not because women aren't competent. My point is that it wasn't given to them. How are we messing this up? Well, so some things to be mindful of. We need to commit to defining what the church is. And I don't mean this, guys, I'm not trying to get technical on you. What I'm saying is that you need to understand what the church is, though, right? So you understand the role that it plays. The church of God are all the saved people in the world. Those people end up congregating locally, and they devote themselves to fellowship, to the serving of God and one another. You need to know what that is and what it looks like so you don't confuse that. Do you know the governing authorities isn't the church and the church are not the governing authorities? They are to be distinct. Did you know also that the church, that there are roles that the church plays that you as a husband, the church cannot play? An elder can encourage you in your marriage, but he can't be the husband. Well, why? Because that's not his role. We need to honor those who are older within the church, and we need to listen more. Listen, these are some of my observations, okay? So you can take them for whatever you want. You don't have to agree with them, okay? But you got to allow me sometimes as a minister to make some comments on things that I'm seeing, because I have to address things that I believe could infiltrate the church. From talking to younger people and from older, there's some concern about the lack of communication or the the feeling like you can lean on those who are older. Whenever we make the comment, there's nothing new under the sun, amen. But brethren, what that doesn't mean is that in time and places, sometimes different areas that are problematic can increase. Like, for example, would you agree that homosexuality is increasing right now? It seems to be that way. I'm not saying it hasn't ever existed, but it's going to become more and more of an issue around you. That's what I mean. And what I'm hearing from those older is that they're feeling like those younger do not put as much stock into what they have to say. And from talking to younger people, they seem to confirm that sometimes. Brethren, in the body, we have those who are older, and we need to listen more and learn. This is a gift from God. In particular, we need to consider the why this rolls and the what. That's kind of tied into how the church is formed. I won't go on. The better understanding that you have how this is put together and the roles, the more appreciation you will have for what people are doing. Okay? And this way, we can work towards those goals. If we have a definition and understanding of what they are, now we can look to young men and say, hey, even if you never serve as a bishop, this is what you're working towards. Can I say this? It doesn't matter actually if you're going to serve or not. I think a male or female can still benefit from 1 Timothy 3 and Titus 1 whenever you look at elders and what's expected. I think everyone could be an encouragement to have a good, healthy marriage, a good relationship, how they are with their kids, controlling their anger, how they are with their community and the reputation that they have. Okay? And then I wanted to specifically say this. Have respect and sympathy for Rod and Billy. And I'm not for Rod and Billy, because this is North Collin. This is our local fellowship that we're participating in. Not everyone by any means, but sometimes if you've never been in a leadership position or have not worked with those in that position, sometimes you do not appreciate what they're doing. Brethren, we asked them to serve us in this capacity. They did not get in this for a title, and it's a work anyways. And let me tell you, it has weight to it. Be thinking about their wives as well. And I believe you do. But brethren, it's hard. Like, for example, we're right around the corner from like a class on parenting. For example, they're going to share their experience. Do you know one of the reasons why we asked them to serve is because we looked at their families and we said, we feel comfortable with that. Okay? Is this a gift or is it a curse? All right. The family, if I were to disrupt this, well, I would have wives leading and men submitting. This happens sometimes in our culture because there are some women that are absolutely, they have it in them. They're like, no, I want to lead. But I'll tell you another thing that's happened, my observation, take it for whatever it's worth, okay? This is an opinion. We have too many men that aren't leading, and it's putting the wives in the situation to step up to the plate. We've left them no option. You know, a mom, she just gets it done. A mom have all these kids and all this crazy, how do they do it? I don't know. They get it done. Well, let me tell you, if no one's leading the house, they just add that to their list. They're like, all right, another role I'm stepping into. But the problem is everyone actually ends up being hurt from it because God's order and design is accurate and it's successful. But that's one thing I would mess up for sure. Do you ever see that in our culture? I would have children lacking the respect, lacking the roles of their parents. I would probably downplay obedience, and I would mess up the hierarchy. I would have super focus on the kids and less on the parents. Have any of you seen that in our culture today? No? You know, and it's everywhere. It's everywhere. Paul says, children, obey your parents in everything. One of the issues that we do is that we'll see examples of people that we feel like went too far, and we overcompensate. I'm trying to be a little lighthearted. My kids are driving me crazy right now in the van because they like to listen to this one channel over and over again, and it's driving me crazy. And actually, I'm gonna blame this on Billy. Billy had made some comment lately, and it stuck in my head. And I went, "Hey," I said, "Guess what? Whenever I was riding in the car growing up, guess who got to choose what we were listening to? Any of those 40 and older?" I'm just kidding. Who got to choose? Parents were. I finally had this moment, like, "Hey," because they were complaining. "Oh, they don't want to listen." I said, "Yeah, wait a second. Mom and I are going to listen to what we want to listen to. And at home, we're going to watch, and we're just, what is happening?" Can I tell you something? You know, the other day, we were over at Dot and Bubba's, just had a good little family get together for birthdays, with Reagan and Lindsay and the kids, just the family. We were together. And when we got back to the house, Jace opened the door, and the door hit his foot, you know. But at the time, I didn't realize how bad it was. So I'm just sitting there like a dad. I'm like, you know. Well, then he comes over and he's like, "Dad, that really hurt." Okay, I didn't realize. If I'd done that, I wouldn't have given him a hard time. What am I getting to? Listen, he is made in the image of God. He's his own being. And he needs to be loved, and he needs to be felt important, and there needs to be in that kind of context, a level of respect for that, okay? It's a real thing that you could belittle even a child, okay? I would never mean to do that to him. So I get that. But brethren, I gotta tell you right now, whenever it comes to decisions, I'm not asking him what his thoughts are. And even if I ask him, "Well, what do you think or feel about this?" I take it with a grain of salt. You want to know why? Because he's 8 years old. He's not competent yet. My role is to train him. My role is to teach him. His role is to learn. And our inability to do this is having a ripple effect in families. We're overlooking this one. And that's why people in the 90s started saying, "Why are all these sitcoms making the mom and dads out to be foolish and all the parents competent?" Well, you can thank yourselves for that one. So we got to be mindful, husbands and wives. I mean, we need to support each other. We need to support each other by filling the roles that God wanted us to fill. Lift each other up with words of encouragement. And again, communicate. Children, please remember this, that your mom and your daddy, they love you and they have your best interest at heart. Their guidance for you is for your good always. They learn that from their Father, God. They are supposed to train you, and you want them to do that. And they're equipped to do that. Managers and non-managers, this is the last one. I put managers and non-managers. I don't think any of you have slaves in here. Okay. Most of us are not managers. To those of you who are managers and are CEOs, I'll just simply remember this. Remember that with your position and your power of authority comes a great opportunity for influence. Can I remind you that we are always supposed to be fishing? Use that opportunity to do good and shine as lights. To those who are underneath someone, may I remind you of this. Work hard. Don't pretend. Don't seek just to be people pleasers, and so you're all about eye service. But sincerely do your work as you are working for the Lord, because you are working for the Lord. There are too many managers whose God is this world, and that's not you. But there are too many young people in particular, and I tell you, I blame their parents. But they are not, listen, no joke. I was hearing a guy talk about this to one of the baristas in Starbucks this week. He was just telling a girl, I'm just, you're just, thank you, yes sir, no ma'am, I just appreciate that. And she's like, well, to me, that's just common courtesy. I don't think you need to hear this, but I would rather say it. To my young friends, if you're not working yet, or if you're about to start working, can I remind you of some basics? There are Christian principles that you need to keep in mind that also work within a culture. It never is old to say, no sir, no ma'am, yes sir, yes ma'am. Can I encourage you, look at people in the face when you talk to them. Whenever you're serving people, remember this, they're keeping your company in business. You're providing a service, and they're supporting your service. You say things like, thank you, come back and see us. You're joyful, you have a good demeanor, and you work hard, regardless of what other people are doing around you. The thing is that people may reject God, and they may have something to say against his people, but the reality is his people understand their roles, and every society is blessed by God's people. They're blessed at McDonald's, they're blessed at the doctor's office, they're blessed in their marriages, and the governing authorities are blessed by them. It's a dark world whenever you snuff all the light out. Amen? So that's it. Thank you so much for your attention. Think about this. If you need to be obedient to the gospel, we offer that as well. As together we stand and we sing.